Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our IWDS Transition Local Discovery Meeting. This is session number 17, and today's date is May 23rd, 2024. We have not met in a while, so we're just going to kind of go through some housekeeping items of how these meetings are going to be structured since we'll be meeting on a weekly basis again. So the first thing we'll be reviewing with everybody are the project updates. So we're going to keep you in the loop on what milestones we're currently working on, if there's any discovery in process, and then also give you updates on our sprints as well, so you kind of have an idea of what is in development. That's going to be the first small portion of these meetings, and then we'll go into the today's working session. So these sessions will vary week by week, and they could be demos of things that are already going to be created and developed, and we'll be showing you some pieces of that. It could be discovery work for milestones we're currently working on that we need some input from you all on, or it could just be some other comments or questions that we need to kind of flesh out before we can even get to that point where we're doing discovery. So before we move on to project updates, I did want to give a quick introduction to one of our new BAs on the team with SIU, Danny McLean. Danny, I believe, is on the call. If you wanted to give a brief introduction and say hello to the local people, that would be awesome.
Sure thing. Thanks for the introduction. Yeah, my name is Danny. I've worked as both a PM and a BA for the past 7 years or so, so I'm looking forward to getting up to speed and working with you all.
Awesome. All right. So then I will go ahead and pass this over to Al. And Al, if you wouldn't mind giving us a brief project update, and then we'll get moving right along into today's working session.
Okay, thanks, Taylor. I welcome you all back. We haven't met with you for a while, and I wanted to make sure that we started getting this kind of a refresh on what we're doing to you all and get some feedback so often and early, so to speak. So now these will be recurring every week, should be on your calendar on Thursdays, and so this is great to get back with you. All right. Diving into where we're at. So currently, like open item, we have, just so you know, we have Taylor, of course, who was just speaking. We have Lynette, Danny, and myself. I've been also helping in the BA area. And all of those folks I just mentioned are business analysts that are dividing and conquering our milestones and basically requirements. Now, you'll see these milestones here, but you will notice, and if you're thinking about through these, that there is some overlap, and you'll notice that in some of these presentations we'll do, and some of the discussion we'll have with you. So there's not a clean line necessarily around these, and we're working through that to make sure that we don't have any gap because we do have overlap. Okay, so customer tracking is in discovery and in development, and that's that initial intake. And we'll be able to, I think Taylor will be able to show you some of that today. The application process is in discovery. Okay, so discovery, remember, we were pulling the requirements, doing the research, building out requirements documents to come back to you all with, to also our state SME group with, and really hammer those out until we get to a point where we can add stories into our system to pass over to those developers. So applications are in discovery. That's milestone B. Milestone E, service templates and collection. That's Taylor's area. That's a lot of configuration there, really. And when we talk about service templates and collections, we're talking about configuration type items. So the first two are really everyday usage type components, functionality. The next one, service templates and collections, and then the next one's ending relationship management. As you all know, those two are more configuration items, and they have to get that. We have to get those set up in there, so you can actually do all the customer tracking, application assessments, and case management work. So obviously, we had to start with that foundation. So we have we'll be able to talk to you a little bit about entity relationship management and applications. Okay, there's continuing discovery going on in open, of course, on the service configuration applications, ETPL. We're putting our arms around that and getting that provider engagement and providers and their training programs into the system, those types of configuration events. And then trade, Danny's taking on trade with some discovery that just started with some of our key subject matter experts in the trade area. So we got to pick that up and make sure that's integrated across the board into the new system. So that's kind of where we are as far as deep dive open items and development. And we'll show you some of that requirement work today, and we'll also be able to show you a peek of some of the stuff that's developed. Okay, we just completed sprint 6. If you remember when we talked about sprints, those are 2 weeks long, and those are taking requirements and developing them into the code and into an application. And then, of course, we do internal testing, and we build that up until we get to a feature set that can be shown, and then we're getting close to a feature set that's going to get into a UAT environment, so you all can actually get your hands on it and give us feedback. So this is coming along pretty good. We're in 7 right now. We've been working on in 6 up to 6, or no, I'm sorry, in 6 we completed 83 points. Doesn't really mean too much to you, but each story is pointed out, which is kind of the complexity and time it takes to do that. There were 61 stories completed in that, so in a 2-week period, that's quite a bit. And then sprint 7 we started last Friday. We are in the first week of that, and usually we have about 55, 56, 60 points in each of those stories, or each of those sprints. So that's development stream going along, and that's kind of where we're at from our milestone discovery work and development work. Thanks.
Awesome. All right. Any questions about that before we move on to today's working session? All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on to the working session. Al, I have you up first for the entity location and context. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'll let you go over what you would like to review with that. And then once you're done, I'll take over and we'll review customer intake.
Okay, I'm going to share my desktop here. Hopefully, first of all, I hope you see this agenda, but I'm going to switch it over here. So I'm going to start out with what we call our basic requirements documents. These are, I think a little bit of this, now that I think about this, a little bit of this, I'm pretty sure quite a bit of it, we passed by you back in January, February timeframe, because I had started on entity relationship at that point. So I think you've seen some of these, but the entity management, and just to kind of give you, why did that do that? Hold on. There we go. Entity management. A lot of you know about entity management, and basically we're getting in the entity management side, those entities are providers, as you all know, providers and employers both. So that's why we're basically calling those entities. And then we build those, right? We build those entities into the system. They're providers and and employers, and then they have locations that we tie services to, we tie relationships to, we tie funding and all that to, and training programs, of course, if they're a training provider. And you configure that all today, if you remember, is back in that IWDS menu items where it says entity search, new entity, location list. relationship, all those areas. So we broke this up into this major requirements document into 4 documents right now, and it'll probably be broken up again. And we've worked with the state SME group, and we've hammered this out, and we've got 3 of those documents approved and ready for and working those through development. 1 and 2 have been pretty close. They're pretty close on development. And then 3 is relationship management. We're working on that now. Then we get into 4, which is training programs, ETPL, entry into the ETPL and all that kind of stuff. We are just getting into that. Well, I should say I'm just getting into that. Or Laura Dom and Paula Berry and a lot of other, Lisa and a lot of other folks have been hammering that out for a while now. So we're just getting into that process. So just to remind you kind of how these work, what we like to do is first that research part to say, okay, what's currently going on? What's the data we're collecting? What's the reporting points? Those kinds of things that we need to make sure we track, as in the reporting and tracking, both for your local reports to think about those, and also for, of course, for the DOL, the Pearl elements and all that. So we first see, okay, what are we tracking today, data-wise? How does it flow through the screens? How does it flow through your process and all that? And a lot of times you'll see a lot of documentation in these up front with kind of like the currently what we're doing. And that's where this basic part is here, where if you remember, it shows us, we kind of lay out relationships between things, data that's going on, and then we try to explain that as it is today. And then we get into kind of modifying those attributes if they need to be modified according to today, what you want to do in IWDS 2.0. Okay. So I'm going to kind of start there, just a few points to show you some naming conventions and some values that have been updated, upgraded probably since we saw you last. And then so that when we get over into some demonstration, and we have some small demonstration that's not huge yet, but you'll kind of relate that back to what it used to be in your mind. Okay. So if you remember, on this, and this is just about this particular document here, I'm going to show you is just about entities and the requirements around entities. Okay. So I know a lot of you don't necessarily separate that entity location out in your mind. You think, when you think of an entity, you think of an entity that is at a location, and you'll see kind of how we kind of handled that with the first entity. But we do separate that in the sense that in the system, we do actually tie those relationship services and all those kinds of things. We tie those to a location, because if an entity is a college, say it was Lincoln Land, I always use that. Sorry, I pick on that all the time, but comes to my mind first. But if it's like Lincoln Land, they have different locations potentially, and they have different training programs and different services that are provided in those different locations. So from a long time, you've always tied services and training programs and all that to a location. Okay, so but this one, we'll get to the next one in the second one. This one's just about that entity, and there are not a whole lot of attributes that we keep on the entity itself, but the entity with the locations together, we obviously have a lot of attributes on. So this is just about the entities. One of the things you first had is when you created an entity, and we're going to show you that screen here in a minute. The first thing you had was, for whatever reason, over time, there was a drop down that said agency type. So already it was kind of interesting, because we went from entity, the word entity, to agency, and we also know that entities are providers and employers. So you'll see now that agency type drop down and defining what this overall entity is is now called entity types. And these are the cleaned going forward entity types that we have in the system. And they're a little bit different than we have today, but not a lot different. Okay, so these adult education literacy association, community-based organization, community college. These I won't read them all. And then of course we have employer, and there's employers a little bit of an entity type is a little bit unique. Most of these are, are providers, but this employer is a little bit unique because we gather a couple of other attributes for an employer if somebody selects the employer type. Okay. When we get our info bubbles in, these info bubbles, if you know, like if you hold over or you have an icon or something and you hold over it or you press it or whatever, then an informational pop-up will come up, like a hover pop-up, and it'll tell you more about that particular term, whatever that term is. In this case, it's entity type. And these are the defined, the terminology defined about those. Okay. Okay. And then we get down to, so that's entity types. It also describes educational institutions. Okay. These are attributes around it. Okay. Another thing we had on, if you remember on entities, we had a couple fields that were, I think they were optional actually, and that was, we had I think it was accreditation date and body, or maybe it was auditing. I can't remember for sure if it was accreditation or auditing, but we took those out. Those aren't necessary, and they're more tied to training programs, not tied to the entity level. We also have the NICS code, and the NICS code and the in business, the NICS code and the user unemployment insurance account. Those two only come up when we select employer. So that's a little bit of a change, and you'll see that. So really the only required attributes from an entity perspective is that entity name. Of course, the identity, right now we have two different types of identity. We have it flexible, so we could have more identity in the future. We could use a code like a Dun & Bradstreet code or something like that in the future, but or maybe some other code we decide. But right now we have FEIN, SSN as the identity types, and of course we hope it's FEIN in most cases. Entity, or I'm sorry, for the identification type, and you could just select that and put which one you want. And you'll remember there were a couple fields there on that entity creation or edit before. We just kind of clean that up a little bit, and you select the type, and then you put in, we use one field to enter that and format that. So really entity name, of course the ID and the type of ID are the required elements. Okay, and then you've got an optional website and do DBA. Okay, a little on this. So when you come in, you will come into a landing page, which is the entity listing, and you'll have a filter on the left, and we'll show that, and you'll have the list at the right. You'll be able to add entity, and then this is kind of the flow here of all the pages. And then, but the ones we're going to talk about pretty much here are entity listing, entity details, and add entity. Okay. I think some of you have seen this. If you haven't, I wanted to show this again, and from basically a wireframe perspective, and then we'll see it. And that is, let me try to get this a little bit bigger. Okay. All right. So this is your landing page. So when we go to entity management and we go to like management tools, there'll be an entity management from the management tools, and whatever role is assigned that we haven't gotten to yet, like a user role that's assigned, privileges to see this or see it and be able to edit on it, we'll have that menu item available. And when you get to here, then the basic list comes in, but of course it's paginated. So what I mean by paginated, it looks something like this, where you'll have a number of pages, but we bring back just the first page. You'll have settings available, of course. Of course, for that, you can set that to 10 items, 20, 30, 50, and then those come back. So, because if somebody says, wow, you're bringing back all, we're not bringing back all, but this is an all type position that it's in, and the list looks kind of like this. There's a few things that are really actually upgraded in a few rounds we have done in development, but this is the basic look and feel. On the left, there's a panel. And we have this same paradigm. We had it started it over in grant monitoring system, and we are continuing that now with this filtering capability. So if you're looking at customers, applications, entities, providers, all those programs, services, you're going to continue to see this very repetitive user interface that has a filtering process on the left and a list on the right, and it's kind of usually your starting point. Okay. This can also, since this screen drawing, this can also be set so that this filter is on the top and this lists underneath it. So if you have some screen restriction size for width and you really don't want, you want more of a list showing with more columns, you can kind of just switch that and you can stack those. So, because most people don't like, most people like to see as much as they can, and most people, are okay with scrolling up and down, but not. It's not as fun to look left or right. But either way, you can switch that back and forth. You have several different filtering capabilities, and these, what I want to say, are logically. How do I say this? There's a logical and between those two. So if you're saying, okay, I want a name or location that has the word Lincoln in it, okay, but I only want to see a certain entity type, like colleges or or associations or whatever that entity type is, then I could put that word in there, and it'll filter on both of these, not or, but and. Okay, so that's important to know. And then you can just go down the list. You can add multiple entity functions. You can add, and that entity functions. When we get to locations, I'll tell you about that more. That is the old business services, I believe, is what that was called before. Okay, or social services, that's the old human services before. So we've got these lined up with better labels and names to be exactly what they are. But these are, you can, just like any e-commerce site or whatever, you can do all kinds of filtering with this to get to a list you want to look at, or obviously get to a specific one you want to look at. Over here, you'll have capability of a default set of columns. If you go under this little hamburger menu, is what it's called, you'll have a drop down and you can add other columns for the attributes for entities. There's not a whole lot for entities, but and take some off if you want. If you didn't want to see the type, you didn't care about the type, then you could take it off and you could see something else like the FEIN. Okay. And then underneath, whenever you see a link here like this in a grid, this is called a grid or a list. When you see a link, that means you can actually go into what we call the details page or the informational page, a view only page of whatever that is you click. So in this case, an entity, you'll be able to go directly into view that entity details. And then while you're on that entity page in a view mode, you'll be able to go into edit mode if you need to go into edit mode. And of course, if you have the right role, and we do that from there instead of from this grid. Okay. We also have, of course, we need this add entity, and the add entity today goes directly into the add entity screen. But it just so happens in this particular sprint that we're on, we're building in the duplicate detection process so that when you hit that add entity button, it's going to come up with an intermediate search screen so that you can make sure that it's not real sophisticated yet, but to try to make sure that you're not adding something that already exists. So there's another search capability intermediately between when you hit that add entity and you actually add an entity. Okay. And we'll show you that too coming up. Okay. This here just explains all that I've just explained. I want to get down to this is the entity details page. You'll see this also, this user interface a lot, and it is basically a long page that has different sections. In this case, this is really that information. This has changed a little bit, but that's that information of the attributes about that entity. Okay, the name, doing business as, all those kinds of things. The reason this is just labels and a static view is because we're not in edit mode. Okay, if we went to edit mode, you would be able to edit those. In the center of this page are all the locations. And of course, we added something here. We'll talk about that in a minute, operating hours, but these are the locations. Don't worry about the data. It's not that great, but which we give a name, address, a phone number, and then you can click on that and get the hours of operation. And then down here, we show the contacts, and we show all the contacts for all the locations in this view that are under this entity. Okay, so if we have 3 here locations, we'll have, we could have several contacts over those 3. So you see there's a couple here in this headquarters, Chicago, and there's one in Central. And the neat thing about this is we can also select a contact to be on multiple locations. We don't have to add those in twice, or they're going to be, we want to maintain that same contact record, but we can share it across locations, and I can show you that too. That's the details page, and then the other 2 pages here basically are this will pop up. This is what I was talking about from here. Might not be exactly like this, but at the time we mocked it up, this is what pops up, which tells you, hey, this are the hours of operation, and we'll explain that a little bit when we look at the system of all the settings you have on hours of operations for that location. And then ability to add an entity, of course, and then you can select which type of ID and then which type and enter that, and then you can select which type of entity. And now this area down in here, these fields, some of them are not there when you do not select employee. So looks a little different than that, but that's basically the edit. Of course, the edit would look very similar. Actually, we didn't even put a picture of the edit because it's the same. The ability to edit that. Okay, that's pretty quick, but I just want to, before I go to the second of these, which we talk about locations and contacts, these requirements, I want to open it up for questions and concerns, and I'll go back to one of these at a time. Does anybody, first of all, have any questions about these two names we've had? We changed agency to entity type. We've changed entity business functions to entity functions, because there's multiples of those. And we changed social services, human services to social services. And this is cleaned up also. And it's looked across. Does anybody have, like, on this first page, any questions about how this operates before we actually get into the next piece?
Rory asked in the chat, he said he might have missed this when you had the list on your screen, but is registered apprenticeship still in the new entity types list?
Let's look at that. Should be, I think. Registered apprenticeship and entity types, was that in the agency type? I don't think that was an agency type, was it? I think you're talking about a program now.
Yeah, it might have been on the wrong screen. I was trying to remember.
I think I think you're talking about a program.
Yeah, we don't have that on there.
When you go to add entity, it's in the Dropbox, and you scale, and you changed the names and scale scaled that box down, and I like that, and I like, the list you have here, and it's not terribly important. We don't do a ton of work with apprenticeships. I was just didn't know if I had missed it, if it was in there, or if I'm thinking of a different screen. So.
I'm pretty sure that there's multiples of these that could have registered apprenticeship programs, right?
Yeah,
Like,
you could
okay,
have
so
it
that
through a
would be
labor
on,
union or at another school. So that
right,
maybe
right.
it's
That
like
would be down the road.
category.
When we set up a relationship, or actually when we set up a relationship, and then also when we set up, when we set up, I think maybe it's in, I'll show you that in the next one. I think we got on locations, and it would be tied to a location to also, not an entity. Entity's a little bit more generic. Yep. Okay. I'm sorry about carving this up a little bit, because then it's hard to figure out, like, wait, was this here, or was this going down to the location area? And there's a lot of stuff on locations, as you guys know. Okay. What else do we have question wise? All right, I'll move on because I don't want to monopolize all the time, but I'll move to this next requirements document, and then we'll do a little bit of a demo today too. So 2 of 4 is about entity location management. Okay, we broke it off so we could get the thing rolling. And entity location management would be about all the attributes around a location, of course, and context for that location. So it's quite a bit here. And I'm going to run down first of all to some of the stuff on the top is the same, but when we get to there's a registered apprenticeship, by the way. When we get to when we get to not entity type, but entity functions, okay? Because entity functions now are on, these are on a location. So when you talked about your apprenticeship, registered apprenticeship is in here, okay? Youth program out. So these used to be called business services, but they're not all business services, and business services happens to be one of those choices in here, but they're called entity functions. What does this, what are the functions that this entity has? And they're at the location level because each location within an entity might have a few different functions, okay? So that's what this is. This is some of the info bubbles on that. This is of entity functions. We have business services, career services, adults and DW, work-based learning, OJT, supportive services, training and eligible training provider, youth program elements. And remember, when this training has to be selected to be able to configure and add training programs, and some of these other ones have to be selected in order to set up relationships for those. Registered apprenticeship, rapid response services. These were removed. You'll see in here, all these were removed. Okay. And then others also one of those. And then the old human services title has been shifted to social services, and they have been cleaned up. And actually, when I say cleaned up, I want to say they've been reconciled across other places like Service Finder and some of those places. Okay. And those are categorized, and you'll see those in categories when you select them and all that. Now, some of you like, wait a minute, where's this? There was a button on the location page when you were defining the characteristics of a location. At the bottom there was a button that said human services, and then you would go into that and you could check a bunch of boxes in there to set up the human services portion for that location. Okay. Now it's called social services, and you'll see that, and it'll show up on the page. One of the things we are trying to do too is kind of condense, in a sense, all the different screens you have to go to, because because we can now too in technology. We can do things on a page, on a single page, that you couldn't do before. You were limited to. We can dynamically bring elements into those pages, whether that's on editing and creation process based upon selections you make. We can do all that real time. We don't have to have it set up so that you look at a screen and say, wait a minute, does this particular data element apply to the circumstances that I have now or not? You don't have to do that because it'll know ahead of time. But also on these scrolling pages of information, we have different sections. We can put a lot on those pages, so you don't have to go to a lot of different pages to find this stuff out. And you'll see that. Some contacts, of course, the normal contact attributes. By the way, in the obviously in the location, there's all kinds of address attributes too that we'll look at. The normal stuff that you have: address, lines, mailing address, that kind of thing, and city, state, zip. We've got phone numbers, 4 or 5 of them, and same way with contacts. Email address, first name, last name, title, those kinds of things. Phone numbers and status and all that. And then this is going to be a little different this time. I think I've kind of alluded to that before. Before, when we selected that eligible training provider checkbox in that contact screen, that's how we kind of generated a user ID and password to enable someone at the provider level to go in and create and edit their own training programs. It'll be similar to that. You'll be able to initiate that or check that this particular contact, you want them to be able to, they've designated somebody to be able to do that at their location, and you want to be able to allow them to do that. But when you do that, then it's going to most likely initiate an email to them to say, okay, follow these steps to get your account set up. And then once your account's set up, it'll say, okay, here's how you get into the system, okay, to do what you want to do. The reason for that is we're going to a single sign-on type of capability with multi-factor identification. This is going to be all hosted in the Do-It platform. So they use a security resource called Okta. And so Okta's a little bit like its own system and dedicated to the security of, or front door security for all the systems that are on their networks, which is a good thing. So it's just going to be a little bit different. We're not going to generate some user ID and temporary password. Here, it's going to be directing that user to obtain their user ID and password and set that up correctly according to all those standards. And then of course, at the end of that process, it would give them a link to get back into where they need to be. So just wanted to say that's a little bit different, but it's a concept is similar where you're going to be able to say, hey, I want this particular contact to be able to enter programs. And then we're also working right now on the training, becoming a training provider. And when you become a training provider, from initiation, from kind of like you can do today, but instead of going directly over and saying, okay, I need to talk to NOWIA to have them open the door for me, so to speak, there's going to be some pre-screening process and some self-serve process where you're going to enter all that information, and then it's going to be pending, and then the TPL coordinators will start looking at that and reviewing that information online. So that's going to be, I should say, quite a bit different, but it's going to be a little different than it is today. But we have not got that completely worked out, so I'm not going to bring that back to you today yet. Okay, then of course, we're talking about these pages here: add location, of course, location details, add and edit contacts, select contacts. I'll kind of show you that too. And edit contact. I'm going to have to hurry because we're going to run out of time. This is, it's hard to see, and I'll show you in a minute, but this is the full, and I'll say the future because we don't have all this yet built in my demonstration, but Over here on the left, this is location details, right? There's a lot of stuff on location. So over on the left, we have these quick links to quick scroll this to the right location on the screen, so you don't have to just scroll yourself. You can just go here, and this stays static. So even if you were down here, it doesn't show very well in this picture, but even if you were down here, you would still see on the left this set of links, so you could pop anywhere in here. But basically, you have your location information. You have the entity name that it falls under, location. You have all the address information, phone, and all that. In the center portion, we display that hours of operation, ADA compliance. Of course, you guys all know those are already there. Those switches. Corporate office means is this the main office that we associate with that entity. Some notes or description area. Then we have the contacts that are associated to this location and the ability to select other contacts from other locations within this entity to be associated with that location. Also, entity functions, you have one or more of those. That's a multi-select, of course. And when we edit this, we can show you that. Social services, these are just the ones you selected. It's not the whole list. Of course, this is too. Excuse me, I'm drinking water here. There'll be a relationships and a training programs grid. We haven't worked all the way through these because we haven't built these training programs out yet. We're working on this relationship grid, but we haven't got that displaying yet. But probably in about 2 weeks, we'll have this all in here. And this will be the only thing left. So this is the location details. And of course, we can go back to the entity, or we can go over and edit that location. And I'll show you that too. The next page. This is the top. This is more refining, showing you a closer look at the general information section. The contact sections, just closer look at that. The entity functions, the social services, the training programs, and then the relationships, which has like the funding source and all that. Okay. Then this is adding, of course, a new location. All those fields are editable. This is that section where we can set up the hours of operation. This is not mandatory. This is a lot of these with the asterisk are mandatory or are required. I mean, and then here's how we set up. This is a drop down to select one or more entity functions. And when you select them, they come to here. But when you're in edit mode, if you want to get rid of them, you go there. Now, as you know, down the road, this is kind of set up. So down the road, if we have already essentially got a connection between a location and a customer in some way with some kind of, because of some kind of entity function configuration, you will not see an X on there. You cannot remove them, but that'll be based upon rules behind the scenes. So this is how you add or take away social services. Just check or uncheck whichever ones you want. Okay. And that's a scrolling list there. So that's the add and edit location, edit locations. This is broken down then into a closer look at an explanation of how that works. This is the select contacts. It pops up and you can look at all the contacts that are out there that are on other locations that are not on this location yet. And you can select one or more of those to be associated with this location. So you don't enter them twice. And I think that might be actual functionality that exists today in some way. And then here's adding a contact. It looks pretty similar to what you would expect. And then you can save and add another. And then so you can go through 3 or 4 at a time. And then that's also used as the edit screen. It says edit, but it's add or edit according to what mode you're in. All right, I'm going to stop there. And you'll probably have more questions when I get into a little bit of a demo, but so far, do you have any concerns or questions about what direction we're going with this configuration capability? All right, so you will see some of this real time here when I get over here and find my page. All right, I'll stop this and I'll share.
We have a comment from Rory in the chat.
Yes.
So he's just providing some feedback.
Okay. All right. Mirror system current tech consolidates on the functions. Yeah, good. Good. I'm glad you like that. We're trying to, I hopefully when you see this and you see what we're trying to do, you'll say, oh, this feels like other systems today, modern systems today that I work in, like banking or whatever, or e-commerce, Lowe's.com or whatever, we want you it to be more of a familiar experiences based upon what we can do today with the technology that's available. So it should be more interactive, a little bit more interactive, because IWDS was pretty amazing, actually. I know it doesn't seem like it, but the fact that we have a mainframe and back end, but we have a HTML browser-based front end, that was a pretty good deal for taking a system that was that old and continuing to be able to make it as new feeling as possible as you can in browser. But now we got capability to be very what we call reactive and responsive. So responsive, you'll see as much as possible we try to do that, which is basically no matter what the screen size, whether it's all the way down to a phone, sometimes that gets a little bit difficult, but all the way through a tablet, all the way through a screen that I have now, which is about 27 inches. All those sizes, it should accommodate those and make that work pretty well. Okay, so so you don't see like spreading out your screen or whatever, you don't see a system that still stays, a user interface that still stays in like 1/4 of that space as you get larger. And of course, you can also see it when you get smaller. Let me share. Let me see.
And Al, don't feel like you have to rush. If we can't get to customer intake this week, I'll demo it next week.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, we'll just see where this goes. All right. First of all, can anybody tell me if is that a viewable, or is that too small?
I think it looks good.
That one's okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. So, as we develop this out, we're going to refine that top menu. We're going to obviously get branded someday, and this would probably be a logo and all that. You might see dev, you might see staging, you might see UAT or QA, or you might see nothing, which is production. We will probably have some kind of a tag there. It's just going to help you to understand where am I at right now, because sometimes that is important, because as we go through this process of developing this system, we're going to ask for your help. We're going to ask for we're going to point you to a link, and we're going to say, hey, can you go in and look at how we initiate customers or the customer list, or can you go in right now? We've got some new functionality out there, which is entity management, and it's underneath the management tools. And then you're going to want to make sure that later on, you're going to want to make sure you're not in production if we're asking you to test something that's not in production yet. And we're going to make sure that you got the right location that we have this deployed to. So that'll be probably there for some time. I'm hoping that's going to be there until forever. So you'll probably see a logo or some words of whatever this new system is going to be called. It's not going to be called IWDS, I can tell you that, but whatever that is. And then you'll see kind of a main menu. And when you come into this from if you came into what we would call the landing homepage, welcome page link, which would just be something like this, where it just be just the name of whatever that system was. Then you would have a landing page. And this is most likely if you weren't already logged in, you would have some kind of login. You might even have some information on where you were, but you'd have some kind of a sign-in capability there, log in. If you're already logged in to the system and you came in here, you might have, we might have some information here. We're also going to have a dashboard section that is going to be really, when we define that all out, it's going to be showing you all the different activity that's current. And there's several things in workNet that we're going to look at to make sure that that dashboard is very helpful, useful, and really can signal you, whether it's through notification numbers or whatever that is, to make sure you can kind of say, oh, this stuff is hot, this stuff needs to be looked at, and this stuff needs to be worked on. Customers would be, and I'll save that until Taylor shows that, but I'll save that. And if it gets today, it may not get today, but it could also be next week. But that's where you're talking about. Here's my customer lists in my LEO or in my that are connected to me as a career planner or whatever. And then you can filter all those customers and all that kind of stuff, just like we can this other stuff. Dashboard, I told you about that. Reports would be the reporting section where we can get all kinds of different reports. Management tools of this, there'll probably be several of those. I think Taylor, your service configuration, all that's probably management tools, but that's probably not at an LEO level anyway. But this is entity management. And as I told you, this is kind of where this is. Okay. Now I might hit on something that may not work exactly yet, but for the most part, this is working pretty well. Okay. So over here, these can be, if you see this sort icon, you can sort, just click it once or twice and you can sort by name. Remember when I said this pagination, looks like we have 33 we have 33 entities that we've messed around with and dumped in this. Most of them are just junk. It's all junk. There actually is a few of them in here that I looked up just to put a name in there that would be familiar. But we're going, before you get into this, we're going to have this either seeded with good data or actually data migrated into here. And in the case of entities, providers like that, we'll probably have it seeded our data in here that would be actually migrated data in here. Okay, so it makes more sense, because a lot of this does not make sense without data to back up to say, oh, okay, familiarity, like that kind of stuff. You can go in here, you could select 10, and I'd only see 10 at a time, and then I would have paging like that. You could select any, we'll decide with everyone what the best default is. And then you can go over here and you can put in a name. I think this works right now. Yes, it does. Which will find that, and I'll show you. You can reset
Now
this.
we have a hand up here.
Yes.
I think it was Christy had her hand up.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I was just thinking, but if you want to continue, it's fine.
I'm sorry?
I was just gonna ask you, are we able to see these names that you're showing now, without assisting a customer? Maybe I missed that part. So
Yeah. Okay. So now you're not in
Okay.
customer. Okay. So these aren't connected to customers or anything like that. Okay.
Okay.
So these are that entity configuration. I'm going to go right here so I can kind of relate to you exactly what I'm talking about.
Thank you.
That might help, right? It's like, wow, what is this? Okay. So down here, right down here. Okay. If you were going to search for an entity, there's no real list necessarily, but if you wanted to search for an entity today, you would go here, right?
Mhm.
And you would search for that entity, and then it would give you a list. Okay. So imagine that
Okay.
screen I just had, right? On the
Mhm.
left side and this on the right side, okay? And instead of that view button, imagine that this is just a link underlined. So now let's go back
Okay.
and think about that, right? So we're in entity management. We're adding, editing, or just looking at an entity, any of our providers or our employers that we know about that are, you know, associated with our LWIA. Okay. And we're looking at those and making sure we understand what's those relationships, what's the contacts, how do I get hold of them, those kinds of things. Okay. And so that first screen I kind of showed you is, you know, is here on steroids probably. And over here is the list. And it always gives you that list, and it allows you to keep, instead of going like, I'm going to enter something and hit a search button and see what happens, I'm going to go back and enter something and see a search button. It allows you to see what happens in real time. So if I did this, it would show me all the associations. Okay. If I did this and IMC, it should show me just the IMC associations that were just IMC. Okay. Or if I went down in here and said, well, how many of them are, and these are obviously there's bad data in here, but how many are career services? I would search. So basically that's saying, and let me get rid of this. I could say, okay, I don't have any associations, career services. Let me do something different probably. Well, let me reset this because let me just go to career services. I don't even know if that's configured yet. Okay, so we're saying all those do have. If we went here and took away, if we added, I'm sorry, the wrong thing. If I added training to this and took away career services and did a search, that's the only ones that have training. Okay, so this whole thing is saying I want to narrow my, I want to find a particular provider or employer because I want to actually look at them and work with them, or I'm going to add one new. Okay, and so if I had to add one new today, we're working on this model. I want to show you that in a minute, but right today, before you just go to entity and you would add whatever that was. Okay, if I don't know if it's in there, but if I added college, I could do that and add that in. Okay, and I could say, okay, that's a community college, and maybe it was www.lcc.edu. I don't know what it is. I'm just making stuff up. And you could say this is you could say this is a Springfield campus. Okay, now what I just did, I wanted to show you though, is we add the entity information. This is basically it for a community college or whatever. But then since we know that we need at least one location for an entity, we always know that, right? We're not making you add the entity and then go back out and say, oh, I need to add a location. We're just saying, hey, let's get that first location in here right up front. It's not all the attributes of that location, but it's some of that location attributes. And we're just saying, hey, go ahead and add that first one right up front. Should have selected one. And then we haven't got very many counties in there, so we know it's Sangamon, but that's okay. Let's put that right now. You can add an extension right there if you want to. If you don't want to, it's optional. You can add a fax, you can add TTV. So I'm going to create that first one. And so I've created an entity. This just tells me I did it. I created this entity and I created the first location. So when you're in the entity details, which I could go back to this list and I could say, okay, let's see what we have for Lincoln. We got all these. I've got a Lincoln College. This is the one. I've got the attributes about it. Here's the location. I could add more locations now, but I do have the first one. and then I could add contacts. Okay. Hopefully this is making sense. Okay, good. All right. Now I can also, when I add a location, I can also go to that location's details. And this is what I was talking about there. Like I could scroll here. We don't have these three. This one we're working on this sprint, and then these two showing up, or yeah, we're working on also this one here, add relationship process. We'll show you that in the future because that's a big process. And it has we've kind of converted that into kind of a wizard type of thing, and we'll show you that. Now, what I wanted to show you also was what I was talking about, responsive, right? So responsiveness tries to, as best it can, use your real estate on your screen as best as possible. Okay, as you can see, I just noticed that to remind me because I'm like, oh, that's 2 lines, but if it was a little bit bigger screen, it wouldn't be 2 lines. So that's what we call responsiveness, is when we change that screen footprint, so to speak, we try to shuffle these widgets around in such a way that you can still see them as best as possible. Anyway, so this is the location information. If we went into edit mode, we have some stuff there. And now we can go in here. Let me just check on time. We good still? Okay. We can go in here. Okay. And we can, this is kind of defaulted because the first location we added against the entity didn't have the ability in that first screen to set it, but we could set it now. There's kind of 2 options here. We looked around to see how this would be best to handle. And we actually went over to Service Finder and stuff and looked and said, okay, well, how are those coming out? Because if you know, on Service Finder, it does show those hours of operation. We want to make sure we try to get these this data the same. So you can pick which days of the week you're open. So say, kind of normally, it might be this, okay? And you could pick when you start, and I could probably scroll faster like that. And when you end, the other 5 is what we want, but and we can later on we can say, hey, what's pretty normal? Because we can default these to whatever's pretty normal. You could also go in here and say, you know what, depending on what kind of facility you are, maybe you may, or this particular provider was, let's just say it was like it had some social service that they were providing. You might be open 24 hours. I don't know, daycare or something. You might be open 24 hours. So you can just click that button. Okay. You can also tell if it's corporate office. We default the first location as the corporate office. You could change that, but that's what that is. This is really saying, hey, we all know that we have to be ADA compliant in these facilities, but we want to make sure you check that so you're actually verifying that. Yeah, you know what? We've checked this out. This is ADA compliant, accessible to all folks. Your notes, then on the entity functions, which these are garbage, but you can, when you select them, it shows it in a sort of a pill, so to speak. And then in here, we just we show it this way. The reason we did this a little differently is because, as you know, these are categorized. So we probably need to make this a little bit bolder, but these are the categories. So we kind of wanted to still keep the hierarchy, showing you that. It was just a little easier to show you all those like this, as opposed to trying to do it in this type of thing, because they are categorized. I can save that. Hopefully that'll save. It did. And it goes back to the details page where you'll be able to see all the stuff for that entity location. And then I can go back to the entities. If I was deep into this, right, of course, I just want to make sure you understand that. Okay, I can go in and add contact. Yeah, okay. So Dungeons and Smiths are easy to remember. I don't know. I don't know what type of thing there is. We can add that. We want to, all the ones Now, okay, here's another feature that we're adding to this. Today, when you come in with a new contact, it actually defaults that contact to the location address that you're in. So like if I'm adding a new contact and associating that contact to a location, today it defaults that, okay? But it's just defaulting that data, and you could actually change that data anytime you wanted. Well, we thought, well, that's a little weird because if we wanted to stay at the location address, the business location address, let's not allow an edit when we say, hey, they're at the location, that's their address. So if I hit this right here, it brings in my location address, and you can see I can't change it here. If I change the location address, it would change this on this contact, but it doesn't change that. It doesn't allow you to change it except the phones, because there might be specific phones for that contact, but it doesn't allow you to change that. But if you say, well, no, this person's working somewhere remote and we want to be able to get to them remote, you can just say, okay, and then you can put in a different address than the actual location address. We have probably more of that today than we've had in the past because we do have remote work and stuff like that. So we wanted to allow you to have both, but we wanted to continue that sync up process with the location. If you said, hey, we're going to use the location address. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. This phone here is actually required. Otherwise, I won't be here. Active, yes, we want to make this contact active. Is it the primary contact for this location? It could be. We got one right now, so we're going to say it is. And this is that ATA training provider user. When we check this is in the future, it's going to initiate that process of them getting an ID and access to the system. Okay. Hopefully I got that in there. Now, when I go back to the entity location, you can actually see there's my first contact on that location, director. I didn't put an email in there, so it's not in there. And then if this gets long, we'll have pagination. Obviously, at 1, we don't really need it, but it shows up right now. Here's the entity functions we had. And like I said, this is in development right now to show us those social functions. They are in there right there, but they're not showing up yet because we haven't got that done. And then these two pieces down here, they're not complete either yet. So, but I just wanted to be able to show you. Let me see where we're at here. Okay, be able to show you that. Okay, back to entity. And then at any time, obviously, you could jump. If you were all the way down into here and we were looking at a location, this is a view mode right now. And when you're in the location view mode, you can tell, it's static or whatever, just display only. But it's also, it'll show you all the locations that contact is associated with when you go to look at the contact. So
would there be a link on that location button where if you notice something that you did need to edit? Oh yeah, I saw
you got your edit.
Oh, there
right
it is.
here, you mean? Yeah, your edits here. Your edits here for that contact. So you can go edit that contact if you want there. Okay. But we're on a contact screen, remember. If we go here, if we're at the location, you can edit the location.
Okay.
Okay. All right, good. All right. So either way, I was going to show you one more thing. If you're way down in here and you say, you know what, I just want to get back to that entity list, you do not have to back. You can go straight to that entity management list right there. Okay. If you were in a situation where you were adding or editing something and you click to go and you click to go back and you haven't saved yet, it doesn't yet, but it's going to say, hey, wait a minute, you got changes you made. Are you sure you want to get out of here prior to saving those or not? And it'll allow you to save them. So that functionality will be there when it gets there. One more thing I wanted to show you for today, and that was we're developing this. Whenever we get in the future, this is going to morph into what happens on this button. Right now, when we go to here, it just goes straight in and allows you to enter a new entity. We're going to go to this next. And when you get this kind of paradigm, you're going to see this, or this pattern, you're going to see this also over next week, probably when we might have some time, but whenever you see the new customer, it's even like more sophisticated than this. Okay. But right now we're getting this developed out. And basically what we're saying is, hey, we don't want you to just blindly enter another provider or employer without doing some due diligence checking first. So we want you to enter a name. You can, and these are a little different than that filtering out there, because these are basically what I said, that logical and, these are logically ORed together. In other words, if you have something in the name field, or you have something in address, or you have something in the city, so it gives you like a little bit bigger list coming back, because it's not filtering them down. And the reason for that is we want to say, hey, maybe I just want to say, I know this is in zip 62704, and so let's just make sure it's not here yet. I could just go put it in 6704, and what's going to happen here is this window here is going to expand and bring back everything it finds real quickly in with that criteria. So I'm saying, hey, I'm thinking about if I said Lincoln, I'm thinking about adding Lincoln land, and it would instantly bring back those in here. And then when it brings back those in here in this window, it'll have a view button next to those. So you could go in and say, yep, that's the one. Or you could say, I don't see it on that list. I'm going to go ahead and create it. And when you do that, then it's going to take you to this window. So we just want to make sure we're trying to eliminate a lot of duplication that has to be cleaned up later. Okay. Or efforts that you put in and you're like, wow, I went to all this trouble and it's already there. Okay. As opposed to a while ago when I came in here and said, I wonder if Lincoln Land is in here, community college, and I started entering it. Well, it wasn't, but it could have been, because I went straight and entered it. So you'll have that process of searching, and we'll get to the point, we'll hone that in as we go and get better at that. But we'll get to the point where we'll be able to order that list and say at the top or whatever, say these are ordered by percentage and stuff, and say these are the most likely ones that you're going to hit. That could be it, because like if you put name in, right, we're going to have a higher hit rate than if you just say, I'm going to see all the ones in the zip code. So we're going to help you try to get that to, so you at least go through that process of trying to do a little bit due diligence of looking for that one you're going to enter before you actually enter it. Okay. You'll see when Taylor gets to show you the customer side, that's even more sophisticated already. So now what I want to say about the provider side also is we are also going to eventually, soon, we're hooking that to that location side. We're hooking that to a address verification capability. And I don't know if some of you have seen that probably already. So if you enter an address, it'll go out and verify that's really an address, just in case you have some kind of typo or something else. But that'll help also when you go in and search to say, you put something in as an address, and it'll say, oh, well, I'm searching against, real addresses, not just some address somebody put in that may not even equal a real address as recognized by postal or whatever. So that's coming too, and upcoming. Questions? I think it's probably all I can probably show you right now. Thoughts about this? I know this is not, this is not really like sexy or anything, because it's back end, right? It's configuration stuff. It's not that new customer or a new application process, but I just wanted you to know this has to kind of be developed in that back end first, so we can kind of use that data. Any questions? All right, let me stop there.
Quick question.
Yeah.
I noticed that
Yeah,
you
brother.
had the name of the entity and stuff. My question, can you search by just the FIN number, just in case you don't not showing the
Yep.
name of the company?
You can in that second search one when you enter that. We did not put that out here. We did put, let me go back. We did put Well, you got a good point. And I just, if you, on the filtering page, let me share this again real quick because,
But sometime when we put in a name, then a fee number will come and say it's already there, and then guess what? It's a different name with a different fee number, with
yeah.
the
So
same
when
fee
you're
number.
in, when you go to add an entity, we did put that in here. So you put that in right here and the list will come up with that. If it finds that FEIN, it'll tell you. And then
Good,
you could,
good,
and you could,
good.
right?
Okay,
And so you could say, and this, you'll say, oh no, that's actually the one I was going to enter. It's just a little bit named differently. So that's the one I
right.
want. Or you could say, why do they have that name on that FEIN? You might investigate that a little bit, right?
Right,
So
that's how it
here,
works, because we normally go by whatever they have that fee number name as. So you just can't give
yep,
me a name that's not associated with that fee
yep,
number.
you bet. So when you start to add one, it definitely does that. But you brought something up that I want to think about, and that's if we didn't have a filtering capability on FEIN. Now, if we went over here and added that, okay, these are just like all locations, and then we could sort by that FEIN.
Right,
But I
I like,
didn't,
yes,
I
okay.
didn't think
I
about that. We could have that filtered too. I didn't think about that, but
That would be good,
it-
because I do work off the fiend number more. That's no,
okay,
sometimes my first pick, just to make
okay,
sure we don't have that number in the system already.
all right, thank you. We will look into that a little bit better if we can't get a
Thank you.
filter on that. Any other questions?
Did you have, I may have missed it, but when you're on the contacts part, was there a place to delete a contact or do you have to overwrite them?
Okay, so hold on. I believe
Yeah, that's a good question. Same with
we
locations.
can,
Sometimes
we
they
can't.
become
Okay, so we go to
default
so when
or
we
there's
go into a
turnover.
contact, when we go into a contact, um, we don't today, you don't have to override them, but we don't today, but you would make them inactive and they wouldn't show up in that unless we, okay, so here's what our thought was. We're not editing this right now, but if we made them inactive, it'll change the activity period. And what we thought we would do, as opposed to deleting them completely, was in this list right here, we would have an active only switch, and it would always default to active only. And then if you wanted to look at any of the past ones that were inactivated, you could switch that switch. Now, if you're telling me though, it's just good information. If you're telling me, you know what, we just like to delete a lot of these, I don't think there is too much wrong with that, except if we have something associated with a contact. Okay, now believe it or not, I don't think we have
Go
anything
ahead, I'm waiting
associated
for
with
this
contact.
answer.
Well, I don't think we have too much associated with contact other than that contact. If you went into that contact right originally and said, okay, you're going to be that ITA training provider, and then we connected them with a user ID, and then that user ID went in and created a program that we track history of who created that program, who edited that program, and all those kinds of things. You sense, I don't know, we probably couldn't delete that contact then after that, but we could make it inactive. Okay. But if it's not associated with anything, and that's the only thing I can think of that it could be associated with, if it's not associated with a user account that created a training program or anything like that, I don't see a problem with when we putting a delete button on this edit contact page. Okay.
Yeah, it's tricky. It does sound similar to how it is in IWDS. It's the same thing with locations. Like you just have to put a note or something in the address line, like no longer at this location because entity relationships are linked to the location. And then the contacts, like you said,
Exactly.
that person was the primary person that was logging in for, Harper College or College Page, or if they
Yeah, it gets tricky.
didn't create programs, it's a lot of that behind the scenes mapping, I guess, that kind of makes it tricky.
Yeah, and
Yeah, we never did
Al,
deleted them because those people could be associated, or the provider could be associated with past due service that we have. And by deleting it, it removed those names from the old. and then you'll never know where that person went to. It also would affect the IWDS system because now we have nothing to associate that client participant to what school they went to. So it
Yeah,
was
and
always better
I'll,
to inactivate them. And same thing with the contact, the person contacts you, inactivate them. That's why I tend to check with my career advisors and stuff. Okay, who are you talking to at this XYZ place? And this is how sometimes I get to know if somebody is no longer there because they're talking to them on a regular basis. This way, okay, this is the new people, and I will contact the school and find out for myself, and then I will update IWS system with the new contact information
And
and
especially with the
deactivate
a lot of
the other
turnover.
person.
So
Yeah.
then my question was that if that's the case, then is there a user guide or something in production that's going to tell people exactly how to handle things? Like I'm thinking about like,
Yes.
person at a community college is the one that's responsible for entering information, and then they leave and somebody else comes in and replaces them, and like how to handle it to make sure that it's as clean as possible and that we're doing
Yes.
it consistently.
Is the short answer yes. We're going to have all kinds of training and help documentation, all kinds of online right here. We're going to have online help information. If we provide that delete because it can be deleted, or if we can't provide that delete,
I wouldn't want the
one of the
delete to
information.
be in there.
You know, we'll have that information available for sure. Location. I don't see location. You're going to be able to delete that for sure. It's possible to contact if you just put one in, you put it in wrong or something like that. Yeah, you might want to just delete it. But you know, once we get going, you've had some time go by on location or contact, either one. You're not going to be probably able to delete it. You're just going to be able to inactivate it. And we're going to, the default view is going to be showing you only active. And there'll be a switch. You'll see this all over the place on these lists that say, well, I want to see all because I want to see if that was originally there before or something. Because you could take, you know, potentially if it's a location or a contact and it was inactive, it could be reactivated, right? You could say, you know what, was inactivated. Oh, I'm just going to reactivate that because now they're working out of there again or whatever, right? Or a contact. Yep, that contact came back, so it happens to be there. I can work back. So, but these lists will default to. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, what I was gonna just to ask you about that right while you're at that point. So then, do you have like a reason why they're inactive? Because
Well, and Lisa, yeah, Lisa put that in the chat. She said, should we add a reason if we make an entity inactive?
yeah, and I think it applies to context too. Like they left entirely the organization.
We can do that. Definitely, we can do that.
Okay,
That's
and
a
then
good
Mark
idea.
Burgess, Mark Burgess has his hand up as well.
yeah,
Yes.
thanks. Yeah, I didn't want to type it all out, but I think we had already talked about, I think this, Al, of the really not wanting to delete anything because of that history. I think, I think a couple of people have already spoke to that. I think we want to keep that. But the other reason of that was because we want to be able to make sure we're using the absolute correct and consistent name, spelling, all that, where we tend to look down lists in IWDS now and somebody misspelled and then they go and enter it again somewhere down the line because they don't find where they don't find that entity or that program or whatever. And so they just enter it again. And so if you start deleting things, you've lost maybe the accurate one, and then someone goes and puts it in inaccurately again. And those errors will happen, but by keeping everything and never deleting it, it'll minimize that. I think the only reason I would see a delete, and if we want to go to, if it's not something that happens regularly and we just want to use this as a reason, like Lisa was asking, is if I started putting something in and before I actually entered it fully, realized I don't really need to put it in. And what I don't even know why that reason would be necessarily, but you don't want to end up with a bunch of junk in there either. But I think, that becomes a tricky situation of if you start putting it in going, well, why am I now deleting it? But I think that's helped by what you explained earlier of it's going to ask you before you exit, do you want to save this or not? So in that instance, if you're not even done putting things in, you would just say no. It would be as if you never did anything, right?
Right.
Because you
If
never
I
saved
go
even
out, yeah,
the most
exactly.
small bit of it. So if I just start
Exactly.
typing in ABC incorporation and go, oh shoot, I don't need to do that, or I don't have all the information I need today, I just click out. It asks me, do you really want to leave without saving? I would say yes, because I'm not really ready to enter it fully, and I wouldn't want to start it and then have to come back later
Right.
and somehow, I'd rather start that situation over from the beginning to ensure I get everything correct. So I think because when we talked about this several weeks ago, you didn't have that function in there. I think it was asked of, we need something to hold information, and that was the way you were doing it, instead of it automatically saving the information, kind of like Teams does, or virtual OneDrive or something like that, where it's automatically saving. Yeah.
Right.
So I think
We
you're
went
in
to
good
that.
shape
You're
with
right.
what you're doing.
Just real quick. Oh, sorry, Mark, were you done?
Yeah, I was
Oh,
just
we
saying,
cut him
I
off.
think,
Okay.
I think you've been able to address the questions they've had, except for, I think we ever had talked about what Lisa said is, if you're going to delete or mark something inactive, we want to know why, because we
Yeah.
really need that history.
Yeah, and hey, Al, because I know you're at time now, but can we talk about, like, I've just been thinking about this DBA and the fee number, and Robert's comments about how he uses the fee number. I just want to raise, is there like I know that we have access to Dun and Bradstreet information. And so what I was wondering is, if we have access to that, if we put in a fee number, could we connect to that system so it would bring in the DBA, so we could, attempt to eliminate more of the
Yeah, so we
incorrect
can do
names?
that. Lisa,
That
we can
would
do
be
that.
good.
We do that now in EBS, I believe.
Yeah.
IBS or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if we could do that here at the entity location when you're entering a name, and even like if I entered the name first and then the fee number, if those two didn't, I mean, let's talk about it offline or in a different meeting, but I just wanted to throw that out there while it was on my mind, and let you get back to getting local input. Sorry, guys, I didn't mean to.
No,
No,
that
that's
was
right.
good. That was
That's
good,
good.
Lisa.
Yeah.
That's a good
That's pretty
suggestion.
good.
Yeah, I appreciate that too, because we have issues locally where people are writing in OJT or whatever the case, and there are very similar names of businesses that are completely different entities. And the last thing we want to do, like for us at least, is pay the wrong entity. So anything you guys can do to do some checking behind the scenes would be great.
You bet. Okay. Awesome. We're running out of time. Obviously, we ran out of time, I believe, and I apologize. I'm already over. We have two things already teed up for next week. We've got some great feedback here today. We're either incorporating that or we will incorporate it, that I've tracked. Any departing words that anyone wants to have, definitely welcome. I don't want to cut you off. All right, thank you very much. These will continue. You'll eventually get your hands on this system in a user acceptance area, so you can even think about it more as you're sitting and working with it. Because some things come up. You're just watching something on the screen, especially when I'm flying through it. You would probably go, well, maybe I don't understand it exactly correct. When you get your hands on it, you probably will, and you'll be able to find those nuances where you say, this doesn't seem right. Okay. Taylor, Lynette, Danny, any of you guys have anything you want to say and depart?
Nope. So we will review customer intake next week, and then we'll also start the discussion on relationship IDs as well. I know that Sarah had contacted all of you to get information regarding those IDs. We want to just put a thought in your minds right now about the possibility of eliminating that relationship ID. Think about it over the next week, and that's going to be a discussion we'll have next Thursday. Otherwise, I hope you all have a great weekend. Rory, I hope you enjoy your little party you're having over there.
Yeah, definitely.
Pinata party.
Pinata.
Printing party.